The bed was empty. The sheets were cold. That January morning at Sandringham, with rain beating a gentle rhythm against the window panes, I stood in the doorway of his room and saw only the impression in the mattress where he had lain. Just days before, we had celebrated his 28th birthday. Now the silence in the cottage was a physical presence. It was the silence of a future that had vanished overnight. My brother, Albert Victor Eddy, to all who loved him, was gone. And in the quiet of that room, a single, unsettling thought began to form. The crown, which should have been his burden, had now passed to me. But to understand why that thought was more of a relief than a horror, you must understand the boy who lay in that bed, the gentle, listless prince, who was so utterly unsuited for the weight of a crown. Our world was one of discipline and duty, a world we shared from the beginning. We were sent to sea as boys, crammed into a small cabin aboard HMS Bacchante. We were to be treated like any other naval cadets, our father insisted. But that was never truly the case. We were princes, and our every move was watched, our every companion handpicked by our tutor, John Dalton. It was there, in that floating classroom, that the difference between us first became impossible to ignore. I took to the routines of the Navy, the drills, the lessons, the strict order of things. It gave me a framework I understood. But Eddy sat through his lessons with a kind of vacant politeness. Dalton's reports to our parents made for grim reading. He described my brother as listless and vacant, noting a weakness of brain and a feebleness and lack of power to grasp almost anything put before him. He called it a fault of nature. I saw it differently. I saw a boy overwhelmed by the machine he was born into. While I diligently worked at my mathematics, Eddy's mind would drift. He was not stupid, not in the way Dalton implied. He was simply elsewhere, his spirit too gentle for the relentless demands of his position. Our mother, darling Alexandra, mother dear, began to shift her affections. The reliable, conscientious Georgie, who wrote her loving letters and obeyed her exhortations to work hard, became a steadier source of comfort than her eldest, who seemed to float through life on a current of his own making. I became, in many ways, his protector, but I also became his rival, the brother against whom he was constantly and unfavorably compared. We were two boys in the same gilded cage, but I had learned how to perch on the bars, while Eddy simply pressed his face against them, dreaming of a world beyond. As we grew older, our paths, once so intertwined, began to dangerously diverge. I remained at sea, finding solace in its order. Eddy was sent to Cambridge and then into the army. He was thrust into a world of gentlemen's clubs and country house parties, the very fast set our grandmother, Queen Victoria, had desperately warned him against. And it was there that the whispers began. They moved through the smoking rooms of London like a cold draft. Whispers about a scandal on Cleveland Street concerning a male brothel. Whispers that linked a prince's name to it. I heard them, of course. One could not avoid them. And I will tell you, as his brother, what I believe. I believe Eddy was guileless, easily led, and desperately lonely. He craved connection, any connection, in a life that had been one of isolated privilege. Whether he stumbled into that particular world, I cannot say for certain. The evidence was always murky, and much was destroyed. But the rumors clung to him, a shadow he could never outrun. They created a caricature, the dissolute prince, the libertine heir. It was a cruel simplification, for alongside these dark whispers, there was a young man trying in his own way to build a normal life. He fell genuinely in love with Princess Helene of Orléans and was heartbroken when their marriage became impossible due to her Catholic faith. He became engaged to our dear cousin, Princess May of Teck, in what seemed a final dutiful attempt at stability. But the shadows persisted. There was the tragic suicide of a Gaiety Theatre chorus girl, Lydia Miller, with newspapers hinting at a princely connection. His personal physician, Alfred Fripp, was tasked not with a simple cure, but with a thorough and permanent restoration to health, to eradicate every ailment from his system. The prescriptions suggest a battle with more than just the gout he complained of. He was a man caught between expectation and appetite, between the saintly image the public wanted and the human flaws he could not conceal. He wrote to his fiancée May with a tender, self-deprecating warmth. "To think that a darling like you should really love so much this unworthy creature, which I know and feel I am," he told her. That was the real Eddy, not a monster, but a young man who felt fundamentally unworthy of the destiny forced upon him. It was a cruel twist of fate that his end came at Sandringham, the place he loved most. And in the very winter, I was recovering from a severe bout of typhoid. The Russian flu swept through the house. Eddy returned from a shoot feeling unwell. I took his temperature myself. It was over 101. We put him to bed, thinking it a passing fever. But it was not. His condition worsened with terrifying speed. The inflammation in his lungs cleared, but the poison of the influenza had seeped deeper. The doctors looked grave. It had reached his brain. Soon, he was delirious, shouting for hours without cease. I knelt outside his room, listening to him rave about politics, about Prime Minister Salisbury and Mr. Gladstone, in a way that showed too late a mind that had been forming its own judgments. Over and over he cried out, "I'm devoted to Grandma." It was a dreadful, haunting vigil. Our mother sat by his bed, bathing his forehead, holding his hand as it grew cold. We were all there, my sisters and I, sobbing quietly around him. His breathing grew labored, his face livid. At 9:30 on the morning of January the 14th, 1892, my beloved darling Eddy passed away. The noise and the struggle ceased, and a profound quiet filled the room. He looked, my sister Maud wrote, like a beautiful marble statue of a knight at rest. In the devastating silence that followed, amidst the flood of thousands of letters of condolence, that quiet thought returned to me. It was a thought too terrible to voice, yet too obvious to ignore. As I looked at the peaceful face of my brother, freed from his torment, I considered the frenzy of the modern monarchy, the scrutiny, the relentless demand for strength and conformity. I thought of the political crises he would have faced, the weight of a crown that would have felt like a physical crush to his sensitive spirit. His death was a personal tragedy that shattered our family. But in the quiet of my own heart, I also saw it as a form of cruel mercy. The crown required a temperament Eddy simply did not possess. It demanded a king, and he was only ever a man. The monarchy, in its relentless forward march, had been saved from a reign that would have been a torment for him and a potential crisis for the nation. I inherited his rooms, his duties, and his fiancée, and I began to use his favorite pen, a gold-nibbed one, to sign the documents of a role he was never meant to play. For years afterwards, I would pick up that gold-nibbed pen and feel the ghost of his hand upon it. I never forgot the brother whose death made me king. History often asks what might have been, but in Eddy's case, I believe we saw the only path his story could take. The 20th century would have broken his gentle heart. His legacy was not a reign, but a quiet tragedy that allowed for a different kind of stability. Sometimes, the greatest service a prince can render is to step aside, even if the step is taken not by choice, but by fate. If you found a moment of reflection In this story of a lost king, consider staying with us for more quiet tales from behind the palace walls.